So welcome back, everyone. This is the second in our series of 3 talks about yoga and the process of alchemy. And we did the first one last week. This one is, we called it Pure Gold, and we'll explore that a little bit in a minute. But we wanted to start off with a chant. So Richard will chant, and we're not going to call in response. We're just going to chant. Anyway,
we could just chant it like twice. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the invocation to the Ishopanishad, and it's a tricky one that some of you know the trick, in that it doesn't have the same tune as all the other Shantipats.
At the end.
Throughout the middle.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
There are only 2 notes allowed, not 3. Yeah. And so it's really tricky. And I like to see people do it because everyone gets it wrong.
Yeah, we were trying to have a full orchestra with us to make it good, but given the conditions, we didn't have one.
Should we try it?
Yeah.
You want to read it as we?
No, I want you to just chant it.
Oh, okay. I got to choose a. Om Purnam Atta Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Again. Om Purnam Atta Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So the meaning of this is appropriate. So Om, you all know what Om is. Or actually, nobody knows what Om is. They are Om. So, but Purnam, so Adha just means that. So that is Purnam, or completely the whole thing. And Idam, this is Purnam, or completely the whole thing. So this and that, which usually don't even contain each other. From the whole thing, if you take the whole thing out of the whole remains whole. Okay, so the whole remains whole even as the whole comes out of the whole. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And so this is almost like a joking Shantipat, very appropriate, because in the alchemical work, the whole creation of the universe is said to begin by that which is completely hidden, or which is imperceptible, simply makes one point, or you just put down, you make a dot or a point, and that point is then the beginning of creation. And that point is the center point. And even after that point expands into multiple universes, each point in any of the multiple universes is that point and is the center of all the universes. So every point contains all the other points. And you can actually experience this in your skin. If you go and feel any point in your skin, and you really go into it deeply, you'll see that your entire body is in that point, and the entire universe, in fact, is in that point. And you say, well, what's the point? That's the point. Okay. And so it all begins with a point. And if you take the point out of the point remains a whole point. And that's the point. Okay. Anyway.
And it's very much like what the message of alchemy is, and the process of alchemy, which is this process of transformation. And as we talked about last week, there is this alchemical pot that is formed, and it's often designated by the snake eating its tail. So showing this sort of container that is well sealed, and within that sealed container, then transformation takes place. And this chant really is a reflection of that, this idea of the process of everything kind of rolling back in on itself, in a sense, and actually expanding out from itself. And yet there needs to be this sense of containment in order for transformation to take place. And the transformation takes place from the interfacing of opposite patterns or complementary patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the basic idea of alchemy, the basic of the process of alchemy that we then experience in our bodies through yoga, etc. And within the study of alchemy, the big thing that was sought after within that pot was the creation of gold, as we talked about last week. And we mentioned the idea that, and we'll go into alchemy process a little more in a minute, but we mentioned the idea that gold is this thing that is this element that no matter what happens to it, like you can kind of cover it with all kinds of stuff, and then when you wipe it away, it remains this magnificent element. And so it becomes this symbolic, if nothing more, a symbolic representation of the purity or the infinite understanding and sort of transformation of things.
Yeah, but easily confused as with gold.
Yeah, with something of value.
Yeah, so if your currency is losing its value, gold is the good thing to have. And so I think it's kind of universal. People all over the world kind of like gold. And, as yogis, and you notice that, you wouldn't mind if someone gave you some gold, a gold coin, because you're going to give it to charity and give it to others so you can serve others.
Rather than use it as some bling in your attire.
Right, which
you might go through that
your
phase.
beliefs might get that, oh, this is actually good for my meditation, is to wear golden coats and crowns and toilets and things.
and in India, gold is highly cherished, and we were thinking today, as we were thinking about this lecture, that one sort of visualization or metaphor for this alchemical process is Lakshmi, who represents, sort of gold, as well as prosperity, as well as fertility. But one of the biggest things about Lakshmi is that, she is this beautiful, beautiful goddess that came into being. In different stories, it's different, but in one of the main stories, she comes out of the churning of the ocean. So it's this process of action, counteraction, that produces her. After the hala hala is produced, she comes out as some of the good stuff later.
Yeah, she's carrying a pot.
Yeah.
Haha. she's carrying a pot, and the pot is full of nectar,
Yeah.
the amrita, which everyone wants, and they want it like they want gold.
Yeah.
Um,
And then that has, morphed over time into her being the symbol in modern day India, even of prosperity, or, taking away difficulties, kind of like Ganesh does, but in a very different way, of being this representation that you can visualize, of just having, wealth and sort of well-being cascading out of your own hands,
yeah, she'll even have gold coins.
just falling.
So people like that.
Yeah. And she was the consort of Vishnu, and had all kinds of different stories, and actually had 7 or 8, I think, different manifestations that she would take, all having to do with things like fertility, or prosperity, or um, sort of symbolic versions of what gold might represent to us. And so this is one way of looking at this process of transformation, is to look at it through visualizations, but also to look at it through the actual process that alchemy um, developed. And Richard has studied this years ago,
Yes.
years and years ago, and we've gotten kind of interested in it in the last couple of weeks, because we found an old booklet of his that he'd written, and about this. And so we were thinking it might be interesting to sort of explore some of the ideas of what alchemy was
Yeah.
presented as, and how it
Yeah. So
was treated.
how it's treated. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we'll take the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, or regurgitating its own tail, whichever direction you like. You have to do both directions. And we're going to take its tail out of its mouth, temporarily, don't worry. And we're going to wrap it in the churning of the ocean 3.5 times around the holy mountain, Mount Meru, so that the gods and the demons can then churn. So 3.5 is a magical number in the tantric tradition, but also throughout the ancient systems of alchemy, 3.5. And so there's an axiom called the axiom of Maria. And I'll read it to you. Okay. So, axiom of Maria. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 3. Out of the third comes the 1 as the 4th. Okay. And so, better not to explain it too much.
But if you can visualize it a little bit, that you have a point, the way you were explaining it earlier, with the 1 is the point, and then you have the 2,
yeah,
which becomes the line.
Yeah. So that's what we're looking at now. And so in the Kabbalah, when the concealed of the concealed, okay, so that would be similar to the Atman, or the Paramatman, or the Brahman, or Shunyata. When the concealed of the concealed wished to reveal herself, she first made a single point. Okay. And so what happens then is you have a single point that you've created, and this is represented by the mind like a naga's tail, curling and curling and curling and curling, and depositing or fixing a point in space. And then what appears is a second point, a counterpoint, point and counterpoint, and then you have a line. Okay, so the one became two. And so, but that's very linear and doesn't leave much of a shadow. And so then, from the dialectic of the two, um, a synthesis occurs, which is then the three. And so three points define a plane. Okay. And then out of the three, all of a sudden, she says, came the one as the fourth. So from the triple conversation, which are the three gunas of Prakriti, all of a sudden, this sphere is usually represented as a sphere. This, the truth manifested as this beautiful sphere. And that's the one that came out of the trialectic of the three gunas of Prakriti.
And so you have, the point going into the three dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
And the three dimensions is where the real gold exists, the real, it's all gold, but where the real depth of
Well, that's
things,
where the one
the
manifests.
one manifests.
And so it's manifesting differently because it manifests as enlightenment. Okay. And so if you look at this in relation to what we call the flat Earth theory, which, it's an interesting thing. A lot of people have believed that the Earth is flat. It's a good meditation if you go outside and you start observing the movement of the stars, constellations, planets, and it'll actually give you more of a three-dimensional imagination, which a lot of ancient peoples did. And so that, I think, really helped them to understand perspective and geometry so they wouldn't get stuck. And so if you take a triangle, which is the three, and that's our flat theory, and then all of a sudden you bring out the sphere, you get three dimensions. So you get left to right, up to down. That's two dimensions. Kind of interesting. But then if you want to make it interesting, you add another axis and it puffs out into a sphere. So if you take a triangle and you puff it in a sphere, imagine the planet Earth. Imagine the planet Earth is round like a sphere. Okay. I know that's a crazy theory, but just
bear with him.
Yeah. Don't worry, it's just your imagination. It's going to stay flat. And then if you take a triangle that got puffed into a piece of a sphere, each angle in the triangle is 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And
so you
therefore,
begin with a triangle.
Yeah, and the 90 degrees means that the axi function independently of each other logically.
Yeah.
And
what's really far out about that is that you begin with an equilateral triangle with each of the angles being 60 degrees, right?
Yeah.
And so each angle is 60 degrees, and you take that very same thing and wrap it. And this was done in the minds of alchemists. You then wrap it around the sphere, and the very same triangle has to expand.
Has three 90-degree angles.
And so instead of 3 60-degree angles, it's got 3 90-degree angles. And so that's the kind of imagery, that's the kind of sort of thinking that is very, very much what is required if one is going to really go deeply into alchemy, so that you can see that it in a way is this same form with two completely different forms, one with 60 degrees, one with 90 degrees. And what starts to happen is that the mind either says, whoa, this is really far out. Yes, let's go with that. And then some transformation of thought and mind and deeper exploration can happen. Or either, the mind becomes fearful, or the ego jumps in and says, no, no, I'm a 60-degree.
I'm a flat earther.
Yeah, I, I'm a 60-degree man, and, or I'm a 90-degree one. And you can't, you can't see the other side. And so one of the aspects of alchemy, and this is true, as we all know, in yoga, is that it bends the mind. It's kind of mind bending stuff that that really requires that we not take things for face value, only that you want to look closely at whatever it is you're seeing, but then don't get stuck there, and don't let the mind trip you up there.
Right. So the first stage in alchemy is, sealing the pot, which means to be able to think on thinking, and to remember, thinking is not what you think it is. Okay, I think. And so you start to see the paradox of any kind of thought system. And what that does is that awakens this intelligence, which doesn't get stuck in thought, but is merely the pure observation of things. But then we begin the alchemical process, and we have some experience of yoga or ecstasy. And then the next stage is what we're calling the pursuit of gold, in which the pot really wasn't sealed that well. And you really didn't look at the empty or the impermanent nature of all phenomenon, and you weren't actually feeling all beings in your heart. And so you weren't really feeling that secret joy of just love, but instead the taste made the parts of the mind which were historical, which is like your body and the world around us that we share, those are all products of history, or karma in the sense of history. Histos is flesh. And so the mind has not yet really gotten to the point of that experience of the whole coming up in the spherical thing. And so you're truly still a flat earther. And what you're doing is you're taking alchemy, the process of alchemy, and because of the glitter of gold, and the ego, which is not yet ripened, collapses it and flattens the whole thing back out. And then with what we start to do then is we have to go through the longest stage of alchemy, which in different schools is rigorous. It takes great blessings, and you have to find, great beings to teach you and to bless you. It can take endless numbers of lifetimes. And so this is that point where we project ego onto it. And so it's actually we want gold, or we say, I want alchemy, I want enlightenment, I want yoga. But really the true motivation deep inside is, I want to be the supreme ball, the supreme truth. I want to be wanted by all beings. I want to be the boss. I want to have millions and billions of followers flowing to me so that I can eat them for lunch. I want people to sing my praises. That's all.
And in a way, this is a necessary part of the process, is that it is not this process where we want to or should sort of get totally rid of the ego. The ego function has to enter into this process of alchemy in order for the full depth of the alchemical process to happen. Mm-hmm. So that when you seal the container, if the container isn't sealed properly, that's a problem. If, as we talked about last week, if you don't see that, in fact, you can look from the outside into the container or the inside out from the container. Mm-hmm. And if you put things together inside the container that really don't work together, that can be a problem. And that's part of the alchemy. An interesting part of it is some of the theories about different elements that go in and what goes in, and the rituals that go along with it.
They're very specific, and they're usually secret.
Yeah.
And they're basically the creation through the process of abhyasa, of setting up holy spaces. And the holy space, of course, for we alchemists is our embodiment. And so and there are all these processes where you visualize different deities, or you visualize the different elements. And of course, the two basic alchemical elements we're starting with are mercury. And mercury, remember, as a lot of ancient alchemists did, they thought, well, mercury is holy, I think I'll drink it. Okay.
Or when we were kids, you'd break open a thermometer and there'd be mercury.
Then you'd play with the mercury.
All of us played with it. Oh, well. We lived.
But the beginning of the alchemical tradition, and this is actually based on, is you mix sulfur with it. And sulfur is, I don't know, it's kind of smelly and stuff. But what the sulfur does is it kind of calcifies, and the mercury then doesn't move anymore. And of course, that's symbolic for the mind becoming still. And then the actual container can be concealed or sealed, not concealed. And you can truly go into the mysterious vision of the one. But what happens is we learn the rituals for practice, and we become attached to them, because we always make the ignorant mistake of mistaking name and form. Okay, and so we identify, oh, this is the holy mountain, or this is the holy deity, or there's the holy gold, and we egotistically think, I want that. And then that starts this whole process of splitting the mind into that little tiny bit that you're conscious of, which is not that much. I mean, how much are you actually aware of in the present moment in relation to the universe? It's just a teeny little pea at best. And but as we know from reading the end of the book, it's like it contains the whole. But people, even though we claim to be alchemists or yogis, we don't really believe that for another billion lifetimes. And so what we have to do is practice, and go through the fundamentalism of mistaking our metaphor for the whole and getting confused about things. And we have one of our basic mistakes is called Zeno's paradox, which we talked about last time. And this was in a stadium in Greece. Zeno set this up. And he had this very quick person named Achilles. He's fast. He's often confused with Mercury. He's so fast. He's faster than your mind. And he had a turtle, and he decided to stage a race. And you probably know this. And so, being very fair, they thought, well, turtles aren't very fast. And so the turtle they gave him a huge head start, and he was probably, really close to the finish line. And then Achilles is like, has a bit of an ego. He's very mercurial, and they said, okay, we'll let the turtle go. And then what happened was the turtle has this huge lead, and we start to look at it that when Achilles gets to where the turtle started, the turtle has already moved on. Okay. And then when Achilles gets to the point where the turtle was, again, the turtle has moved on a tiny bit more. And then, okay, it's getting very close. And then, so Achilles, because he can't really quite catch up to the turtle, because by the time he gets to the point where the turtle was, the turtle has moved. And it can get infinitely small, but what happens is that Achilles and the turtle and the whole world just turns to stone. It's frozen in the inability of the mind to work contextually and to see that the situation with the turtle actually requires multiple and contexts of understanding. But we don't have that. We've got to go through all these lifetimes of suffering and turning everything into stone. Okay. And so even if you, who was it, Midas, who had the golden touch, and he would go around touching things and it would turn to gold. And this is really bad at dinner time or snack time. Or if you have kids or pets or something, you say, I just want to pet my puppy, and you pet them and they turn to gold. You want to drink some nice juice, you touch it. And so poor Midas, he would turn everything to gold. And that's our problem as yogis.
And so we get these remarkable ideas, like the idea of alchemy. And it, as we were saying last time too, it's intriguing and it inspires us to go deeply. But then the mind or the ego comes in and counters the situation and either gets us stuck mind-wise by not being able to kind of hold paradoxical situations in mind, or the ego jumps in and wants to take over. And so again and again, we come up with different either mythologies or rituals. And so that, like, the idea of Lakshmi again is a visualization that allows us to then embody this process rather than to become Lakshmi devotees, which is not a bad thing, but that's not necessarily the depth of what that image of the goddess can do. It is this image that allows us to really embody this process of gold or sort of prosperity becoming the end result of this churning of intelligence, of mind, of body, and the necessity of keeping our own container, which is our embodied experience, keeping that
Of the churning.
yeah, keeping that churning and keeping it sealed in such a way through the breath, through the mind, through the movements, so that the actual transformational process can unfold.
So in the sealed ocean, when they're churning, each god has a complementary demon. So they call it anima or animus. And it's either a conscious ritual, but it's part of your mind that's unconscious then, that sees the hypocrisy or the stupidity in your literalism. Okay. And so what we get is when things are around those things that really matter to us. And so even if we're ones who crave gold or crave power or crave fame, most of that has to do with relationships with other people.
Mhm.
And so this is where the alchemy is tested, is in relationship. And so what we're thinking, oh, ego function. So this is early in the process. Ego function is really bad, or mind is bad because it doesn't know anything, obviously. Therefore, we reject it. And that's just theory of mind. Okay. But there are a lot of conspiracy theorists who think, oh, it's bad. And I will just, reject the world because I see the world as, but you've reduced the world to just some really simplistic formulas based on a misunderstanding of either scientific theory or a religious theory. And what's really happened is that you have then excluded other beings from your heart, because what's the scariest thing to our theories about ourselves are others.
Yeah.
Because, or reality, or others are actually the reality.
And it comes back again and again to this, basic ignorance, the avidya of not seeing interpenetration, not really, truly, viscerally experiencing that. And that's where it pulls you out of the alchemical process, or where it creates this huge amount of suffering in the way you behave, the way you interact, or as we said, when you have made your alchemical sealed pot, when you cannot see the interfacing from what is outside of the pot to what is inside of it, that there is relationship there, then the process is limited by that inability to see that things are truly interpenetrating. And
inability to see history.
Yeah, to see history.
To see real actual circumstances. And so fundamentalism again takes over.
I was
There's
thinking about the ripe fruit thing. That was.
you want to do that one?
I don't know.
We could jump to that, or we could do the 6 enemies.
Well, we've only got like 10 minutes.
Oh, 6 enemies next week.
We'll do 6 enemies next week.
Okay, but a little preview. The primary area of focus in yogic alchemy is, of course, the heart, because they tell us, oh, the beloved is in the heart, or the inside the sushumna nadi is the amrita nadi, and inside that is another nadi that we can't even talk about. And so a lot of us, we have learned, oh, I'm going to meditate on my heart. And and when we actually do that, we've run into the challenge of throwing people out of your heart. And even if you throw yourself out of your heart as you meditate, you'll feel it in the prana patterns of the body, because the prana will go wherever there is the belief, or the kind of the bundling of stupid ideas that become a ball that is not processed, and is located, and you locate other people in your body. Sometimes you'll locate them in your neck. Some people give you a pain in your neck. Other people will give you a
in
pain
your posterior.
in the posterior, a pain in different places. Okay. And or your self-conception will give you those same pains, because your opinion of someone else and your unconscious or your hidden opinion of yourself are totally intertwined. And so that's the challenge of the work, even for fundamentalists who have decided that their religion or their lineage of yoga is independent of history and has no connection to everything else, that it just manifested as divine, and therefore everyone has to follow it. And if you don't follow, then I'm just going to blow you up, because it's the most merciful thing to do. And such is the history, the history of religion. But there's a nice thing. Where is that? Oh. There it is. Okay. And so there's this teaching, and it's very simple, that what we do in alchemy is we're cultivating the ego process through mindfulness and the ego process. And so you start to get a more and more experienced ego function. And you start to, eventually you'll see, oh, the ego function is divine. It's the gunas acting on the gunas. And so the metaphor is that only a very ripened fruit will fall off of a tree. And so one has to go through this occasionally torturous process, scary process.
Frequently torturous.
Now and then torturous process, but also extremely funny,
yeah.
if you have a sense of humor, process of cultivating even the extremes of your own ego function. And so eventually it becomes ripe. And then when it's ripe, the process of nature is then it falls off the tree. And then the ego has fallen away as a ripened fruit, and is then also useful because it's digestible when it's ripened.
And so this is this non-modern way of producing fruit. We so often see, in the marketplace, in the United States at least, you'll see these incredibly green bananas that have just been shipped from who knows where. And what we are in our modern age have really lost sight of, and this period of time in history we're currently living through is an opportunity to cultivate this lost art, which is the art of patience, the art of really truly sticking with something, and not ripping it off of the vine too soon, and not ripping it off of the vine and then running away and saying, okay, I've got it. Now I know. When you have in a theoretical process or a yoga process, when you have insight or when you have a transformation happen, there is this tendency to stop there by ripping it out of context and solidifying it.
Yeah.
And so that the alchemy in a yoga process starts to happen when you really exercise patience and you tend the garden of your own experience.
Yeah, and then it comes off the vine.
It comes off
correctly.
the vine naturally.
Should we do that little chant?
Sure.
Well, there's a little chant that you probably know about that called the Mahamrityunjaya mantra. And it has to do with Shiva, who is the ultimate gardener and connoisseur. And the translation, we adore the sweetly fragrant three-eyed one. So unity, 2, 1, 3. Okay, that's Shiva. Okay, so non-dualism, or yeah. We adore the sweetly fragrant three-eyed one who nourishes one like a farmer. He nourishes our imaginary self, the self of space and time, ego function. He nourishes it like a gardener. And then, like a ripe melon taken from the vine, he will pluck it and free us from death with the nectar of immortality. Okay, so he is Sugandhim. The main word I like is Sugandhim, meaning sweet smell, or like the best smell. And so this is nature in action. It's also good for pranayama. We'll chant it next week too.
Okay.
So you might know this chant. Om Trambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvarukam ivabandhanam mrityomukshiyamamritata. Om. So, plucked. And so one might think, oh, that's the moment of my death. And it's actually referring to the moment of enlightenment when it comes.
Yeah.
And then your ripened ego function will be a bodhisattva. Very useful, very tasty for all beings. So we'll continue with this.
Yeah. So this is, we really encourage you to, over the course of the next week, to watch the process of transformation within your embodied experience, in all different ways that it manifests, from mind to body functions to emotional states, and watch what happens when you're attentive to it, sort of giving it the tender care that it will benefit from, and really it kind of transform in a way that is healthy or beneficial rather than contrived. And notice when, because all of us do this, when your ego function comes in, and you may not say, oh, there's my ego function. You may just notice that you are kind of off balance, or you're not patient, or you are drawing conclusions and sticking with them and not listening to others. Those are times when the alchemical process within your experience in the world has been interrupted. And so if you remember, oh, I can step back and be patient in that time and reseal the container of interfacing, then things start to evolve in a way that is actually far more beneficial for others, far more beneficial for you. And that's really where the gold is. That's when the core of the heart sort of idea comes in, where you do not pull people or yourself out of your own heart through your theories, etc. So we invite you over the next period of time to just think about that. Think about imbalance and balance, and start waking up to those moments, because they happen to everyone.
Yeah.
So
I've heard. Yeah.
So you've heard, except Richard. They never happened to Richard.
Right. Yes.
Anyway. Yeah. So next week we're going to look at sort of the philosopher's stone part of this idea of alchemy, and also some of the other ideas that we were just going over this week.
Right. There's a beautiful metaphor of golden shoes.
Yeah.
So that way, if you're wearing golden shoes, then wherever you go, you can dance or twirl or spin or jump.
Yeah. So
anyway, yeah. So the Brahma Viharas.
Yep.
Ahimsa.
Ahimsa.
Upekshanam.
Yeah. Good.
Good. So
thank you all for joining us, and we will stop the recording, and
then we'll,
if there are questions afterwards, we'll get into the questions. So
Okay.
Thank you.